What do you need from journalists? Just the reporting or the explaining or both? Well, it is one of the fundamental duties of journalists to report what's going on, but many a times the reporting is not enough. We need more details, more context, and more background to be able to fully get our heads around most, if not all, of the complex issues we are surrounded with. That is where the concept of explanatory journalism comes in. Journalists must be able to break down, indeed into pieces, the stories they are covering so that their viewers and listeners and readers can have a full grasp of the matter on the table. But there are issues here, and I will come to them in a minute. First of all, in journalism, there is a popular saying which goes, and I quote, "Journalists should know something in everything and not everything in one thing." That is an advantage because you, as a or the journalist in question, will be able to A, understand the subject matter, and B, explain all the intricacies by looking at the bigger picture and also debunking the misinformation that may come up as a result. But the problem is, journalists, as human as they are, can be influenced by certain factors like culture, worldview, or even worse, selfishness. Quote, "We in the media have been doubtlessly having serious debates about objectivity, impartiality, neutrality, and all those terms, and whether or not our opinions can be detached from our journalistic output. So what should we do?" Well, about a year ago, I had an interview with Andrew Muller, an Australian journalist working currently for Monocle Radio in London, and I pressed him a lot harder to admit that he was wrong referring to the Taliban as quote-unquote alerted misogynist jerks. Have a listen. The problem that we are having is that you may be using your own Western lens and prism when analyzing these complex issues. And that's why you have called, you Andrew Muller, in one of your explainers recently, you have called the Taliban as quote-unquote alerted misogynist jerks. Let's, for the sake of our audiences, play this clip.
Just as the Taliban were unlettered misogynist jerks then, they're unlettered misogynist jerks now, and this is most of the reason they were not in Doha.
That was a matter of...
I mean, you heard this clip, right?
Yeah, that's me.
Do you regret calling the Taliban misogynists, unlettered jerks?
Well, no, I think that's a pretty reasonable characterization. I mean, I did see their regime up close in the first time around in the late 1990s when I went to Afghanistan. I can't see any basis for their treatment of women beyond just a furious hatred of women. Unlettered. Okay, possibly a bit harsh.
So now you regret calling?
No,
So now, why do we need explanatory journalism, and what roles does it play in educating and informing the public? Well, before getting the hang of the above question, there is the need for us to take note of the conspicuousness of somewhat a new trend that has been on the rise these days in journalism. And what is it? There indeed has been a staggering increase in the proliferation of the production of, mostly here in this part, explainer videos, even though the audio ones are also as popular, especially in the West. Check out the foreign desk explainers of Andrew Muller on Monocle Radio and or the BBC's Ross Atkins on. The point is, explainers can and certainly do go beyond the headlines and give you the context, thereby making you a few steps ahead of those who only stick to the news, and undoubtedly multiple steps ahead of those who only rely on the headlines, some of which can indeed be sensational, if not misleading. Roles of explainers. Explainers, as an example of explanatory journalism, help us in many ways, one of which is connecting the dots through background and history of the topic or players associated with the issue. Again, one beautiful aspect is breaking down key terms related to the topic being covered, thereby making complex topics more easily accessible to broader audiences. May I say this to my fellow journalists? For you to be able to explain complex issues accurately, you need to be able to understand them completely and be able to figure out facts from opinions and sentiments. Dr. Yvonne Ridley, a British journalist, has been telling me multiple times that at a time of war, truth is the biggest casualty. One funny thing is the use of simple language, because in classrooms and lecture halls, as some people prefer to call them, we all have been taught that the use of simple, straightforward language is necessary. But the baffling thing that plunges me into the world of bewilderment is what you find in many journalistic outputs is mostly a style of language, say English, that is very thick but attention gripping. To some people, it may sound difficult because it is too wordy, as different idiomatic expressions and compound complex sentences have been sprinkled strategically. Oh, Andrew Muller always comes to mind. Yes. Let's have a listen to an extract from my interview with Andrew Muller of Monocle Radio, talking about a part of his explainer audio that took me almost a week before I got the hang of it. You talked about Kim Jong-un's visit to Russia, and let's have a listen to a clip that I got, that I cut out of the episode. In fact, it had to take me more than a week to understand your own, what should I say, bodaciously description of Donald Trump. I'm Kim Jong-un. I have a listen to your Kim Jong-un's description.
Yes, imagine choosing to associate with this tin pot tyrant who spends his days seething in the fortified citadel in the heart of his hermit fiefdom, beset by paranoid fantasies and obtuse grudges, generally reviled, admired only by obsequious power worshippers, certifiable dingbats and or Donald Trump, isolated from his peers, probably more frightened of his own associates at home than his many enemies abroad, periodically threatening a baffled world with atomic Armageddon. You really do have to wonder about the company Kim is keeping. Thanks, I'm here all week. Try the borscht and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I should probably grow out of the bait and switch device where you laboriously describe something but then pivot to saying, actually, I'm not talking about the thing you thought I was talking about. I'm talking about the other thing. But it is effective, and I think that was. I mean, that particular gag. How do I explain it? It's a fairly cheap shot in a lot of respects, but I thought for me the humor was just piling up as many descriptions as you could that could be applied to both Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin. And if I had a serious intent to that, it was to explain why these two gentlemen have decided to make common cause with each other. And obviously it would have been quicker, I'm sure, to say basically neither of them has any other friends, but that's just not as much fun.
Very recently, I got a chance to sit down, well, virtually and hopefully physically in the near future, with Lane Green, a fantastic American journalist currently serving as the language editor of The Economist magazine. And upon playing to him Andrew Muller's somewhat linguistically unblemished description of Kim Jong-un, he said,
I mean, that clip, I think we could agree that is entertaining. You know, it's a journalist having fun and winding himself up and winding the audience up a little bit. And that is meant to entertain right there. So I think there's a place for that kind of language.
But it seems like the convention is still in order. For news, it should be clear, simple, straightforward, and easy to understand. But for columnists, they, according to Lane Green, have a little bit of leeway.
So I think that I would still say common words that one uses, short sentences that are easy to unpack, and where you use things like historical, literary, artistic references, keep them light. Keep them universal if possible, or at least very common. Not in conclusion, it is best to keep it simple. And my style guide for The Economist preaches this over and over and over again: common words, short sentences, and clarity above all.
Well, it indubitably is true beyond any matter of doubt that knowledge is obtained from different sources through different means, one of which are research findings of experts in different fields. So as a journalist wanting to disseminate, to pass that knowledge on to the public, you definitely need to understand it and find your way to interpret it in the language that your audiences can easily understand. Again, ever since Donald J. Trump came back to the Oval Office and sat on the Resolute desk to make decisions that would end up, whether knowingly or otherwise to him, affecting not just the very people that brought him back, including those feeling betrayed. The stories have been largely about him as a person, even though connected to his policies. So what explanatory journalism does is studying, analyzing, and no doubt interpreting policies and laws made by leaders and figure out their effects on the very people they are supposed to target. Other significant areas where explanatory journalism is vital are in A, informing and educating the public, B, promoting critical thinking, and C, encouraging discussions and debates, especially as a result of the explosion and proliferation of the social media. Even though the world of comment section is a crazy one and can drive some people insane. Yes. Despite all the talks and clamor about the issues of objectivity and impartiality and fairness and whatever, consumers of news need to understand that news does not disseminate itself. It has to follow the directions its disseminator has ordered it to. Simply put, our everything from religion to culture to worldview and even worse, our selfishness can and oftentimes do influence our journalistic outputs. And so if you are looking for a solution, let me hurriedly refer you to Islam, to the Holy Quran. And the solution is do justice to everyone. I am Umar Isa Dandago. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.